Today we welcome for our last episode of season 3, Professor Joshua Gans from Rotman School of Management, University of Toronto, for his talk on the broad topic of AI and decision making, and specifically, does AI really create an automation dilemma? So we really appreciate Professor Gans that you agreed to join us today and give your talk. We're really interested in what you have to say on the matter, given your vast expertise. But before we're going to dive in our seminar, I'm going to briefly introduce Professor Gans and make slight small announcements about the next season of VOILA seminars. So we today, given that it's decision making, decided to invite Professor Joshua Gans, who is Professor of Strategic Management and holder of School Chair of Technical Innovation Entrepreneurship at Rotman School of Management at University of Toronto. He is also serving as a chief economist at the Creative Destruction Lab. So innovation, AI, technology, entrepreneurship, strategy, everything about decision making is covered. So Professor Gans' expertise lies at the crossroad of technology, studying technologies such as AI, blockchain, virtual reality, and more broadly innovation and their impact, transformative impact on many domains of economies and the future of work. Strategy, applying industrial organization, bargaining, and decision and game theory to study mechanisms that work within organizations and the processes happening within organizations, as well as competition between the organizations and firms. So, and lastly, but not least, economics with research on economic growth, regulation, climate change, and pandemic. So, there is a number of works that Professor Gans has that pertain to the topic of AI and decision making of today. So just to highlight a few, there is a recent work of Professor Gans on AI strategist. It's an NBR working paper, which is really interesting, and I encourage you all to give a look. I really personally like the fresh take on task-based impact of AI in two works that I'm personally familiar with, is about Turing transformation phenomenon. And the interdependence between skills, so how multiple skills actually affected by AI simultaneously, so it requires a system-wide transformation given AI adoption. And lastly, if you want a more fundamental bird-eye view on AI as a technology and decision-making and management and strategy, you really should check the two books, Prediction Machines and Power of Prediction, so they are kind of interrelated. And in general, please visit Professor Gans's website to see entire variety of his publications, research, and books. Really interesting, really encompassing. So that's about our today's speaker. As I promised, season 4 of VOILA seminars, because you are now all here with us, and I want our audience to continue being with us, and we plan to start season 4 in September this year. So we already start preparing for it, and we would like you, our participants and friends of VOILA seminar series, to decide what you want to hear in the next season of VOILA seminars. So please scan this QR code, and it's just a very small survey on topics that you would like to hear during the season 4. And yes, I will show that QR code and post the link for this seminar series, for the survey later in the chat. So please don't forget to check it. How is going to be the rest of this seminar today? So it's around 1.5 hour seminar. The speaker's talk will be around 40-45 minutes. Then as a moderator, I will provide a little bit of highlights and reflections if that would be due, or we can go straight into the audience Q&A. So you can have your questions directly to Professor Gans. But in the meantime, while the talk is ongoing, you can post your questions in the chat. And talk will be recorded. Professor Gans kindly agreed. And if you need a real-time translation, you have that option. Please find it in the interface of Zoom call. You will see that if you need French or any other kind of translation, there will be subtitles. So with that being all said, I again thank you, Professor Gans, to join us today, and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And thanks for the very kind introduction. What I wanted to talk about today, sort of given the multidisciplinary audience, is sort of what economists are thinking about regarding automation. Automation is the thing that scares people about artificial intelligence in terms of ta all the way from taking people's jobs to all the apocalyptic scenarios are all mostly based on an automated AI taking over the world and killing us all. So it seems appropriate to sort of think about that particular trajectory. I should also add that I come from this uh, uh, from a far more optimistic standpoint. Just to lay my cards on the table, I'm less worried about these things, and what I hope to show you today is why I think that, why I've ended up in that place, knowing that full well there are others who have different beliefs, and neither of the side's beliefs can be informed by evidence yet. So it's still in many respects at the level of a conceptual or theoretical argument. Okay, so. As Ekaterina already mentioned, I have some books. I also write on entrepreneurship as well. I was down in the south of France last year and able to present some of that work. But the most important part is I'm associated with the Creative Destruction Lab, which is a seed stage startup program that started here in Toronto and now is at 13 or 14 sites around the world, including in Paris. One of the hallmarks of it, it was very early to the AI scene. It had the very first AI-focused startup program back 10 years ago, which in this world is many epochs ago. I've been involved right from the very start in that, and obviously AI has absorbed a lot of my attention in that, trying to understand what's going on. So let's get on to automation. So if you ask most economists what they think about, how they would define automation is, and its equivalence with AI, if they assume that, it is basically what it is. It is a substitution of machines for people, capital for labor. And they model it as such. Now, that already, if your concern is about machines replacing humans, you've baked that in to the definition of AI. And I think that creates a lot of biases and has some premises that are things that we should regard as premises, and they may not be founded properly. So those premises are, for instance, this. Uh, there's an idea that robots can do any task. And now, if not now, then in the future, because there's always extrapolation. Uh, there's another premise is that robots will actually end up doing any task for which they have a lower opportunity cost than labor. This is a standard economics uh, insight that goes on. But it still requires that to occur, and there's some reasons why that even that can get some resistance, and I'll come to that in a second. Robots won't end up doing every task if labor can find new tasks for which they have a lower opportunity cost. So basically, robots can do any current task, is the sort of presumption, and they'll do it if it's cheaper in an opportunity cost sense for them to do so. Basically, do robots have a comparative advantage relative to humans, taking into account all the costs of robots and all the alternative things that people could be doing. But if people find new tasks where the reverse is true, they'll have a drop. And so, your view of AI as automation rests entirely over the race between people and machines, effectively, to do stuff. And so, we can feel about that in very different ways, obviously. Um, in terms of that first premise, Danny Kahneman, no slouch to thinking about decision making, as here, has said he looked at AI and he's concluded that AI was going to win. Basically, he thinks AI can do everything people can do in the future. What we're going to do is the interesting problem to him, given that. But nonetheless, he sort of accepts that premise quite strongly. So, what does this argument that is given miss? Because it's the foundation for the fear. One is it codifies what I'm going to call a lump of AI fallacy. It tends to think of AI as this blob that can do all this stuff, and then, things follow from that. The problem is, and secondly, also along that line, is it abstracts from the capabilities of the AI, and it presumes that they can be somewhat superhuman. Um, and they could be superhuman in terms of just be better than us and doing stuff, or they could be superhuman in that they can do the things we do for very little cost. Those are two aspects of superhuman capabilities. And so it abstracts from that and basically, says, can they do this? Can't they do this? But not thinking about what that might look like. And as I said, it ends up with these calls, if you get concerned, to limit competition from automation by focusing and sometimes it basically says, well, let's stop research and AI. Let's stop developing AIs who are focused on doing tasks that people do, and instead focus on something called human-centric AI. And even some of the most, ordinarily hard-headed economists are adopting these terms. But that's it's an odd statement for a lot of reasons, as I'll point out. But the simple one of which is, well, there's a couple of issues. One is there such a thing um, as human-centric AI? What is it? How would you define it? How would you know it if you see it? Secondly, there's a lot of stuff that is automation that people would like to see happen. And that isn't necessarily taking jobs. No one's going to go back and say, "Oh, that washing machine, that was terrible," because it took the jobs, paid or unpaid, of people washing by hand. That was clearly an automation that everybody wants. Everybody wants, and no one cares about the job. I know a lot of automation tasks that I use AI for now. I'm a department head. I have to write endless numbers of stupid emails and reports. Uh, 10 years ago when I was doing this job, it would take many hours and it would be unpleasant and horrible. Now it takes minutes. That's automation. Am I out of a job? Absolutely. Do I want to be out of a job? Also, absolutely. I got better things to do than to do that. So I don't want to go telling all our innovators, stop coming up with stuff like that. But I fear that if we say focus on human-centric AI, or worse, put in policies to try and do so, that's what will happen when there's so much unpleasant stuff that we need automated in line of anybody's jobs. Okay, so let's talk about this lump of AI fallacy. So the issue is it's a play on words for me of the lump of labor fallacy that often comes up, which is it's the same argument where people treat jobs as a lump of labor, and if machines come and do it, there'll be less for the people to do. But I also think the side part of that is that the machines are treated as a lump as well. And that creates its own distorted ways of thinking. There's this really interesting article that came out from Daniel Susskind, who's at Oxford University, last month. And it's probably if you're looking for something to give to your students, of the clearest statement of how we think about jobs and AI and stuff, this is a very, very good article for it. It's quite readable. And basically asks what will remain for people to do. So it basically takes the automation approach and says, what are people going to do based on that approach? Where are they going to win? Where are they going to win? And so until now, the most useful question thinking about the impact of technology on paid work has been what machines can and cannot do. But as we move into a world of AGI, artificial general intelligence, that question will fade away and what will remain? The automation approach in economics invites you to think about the residual of what there is for people to do when all is said and done. It's basically, how are we better than the horses who got wiped out or who were neglected to be reinvested in, let's put it this way, when the automobile came around. So Susskind offers three things. First, there's general equilibrium limits. One good thing about humans is, unlike horses, we're not going to let them all die and not keep on producing them. And so that means that whatever people can do is still around. And so there are opportunity just for opportunity cost reasons alone. There will be stuff for people to do because they are useful at something. Uh, Wiping them out entirely is not necessarily an option, unless the machines are going to kill us all and do that. But let's ignore that for the moment. But just in a normal world. Um, uh, the second part is regarding preference limits. There are things that have an intrinsic value for human input. This talk may be one of them. I don't know. We'll see about that in the future. But, that sometimes people talk about that, or people talk about, the production of art and other things like that. They talk about various things to do in relationships, that there's some value for human input. Again, Danny Kahneman was skeptical. But that's where people grasp on. Or like, what can't the machines do at all? Rather than what is their comparative advantage or not? What can't they do at all? And then finally, there's might be moral limits. We just might not trust the machines to do all sorts of things. And so we'll end up doing it. So in other words, we'll preserve our role by morality or if you will, regulation. Will preserve a role in certain things. And we see a lot of that. That's why we don't have self-driving cars now, is part of it. That's why we don't have judges who are AIs, even though there's lots of evidence that they might be less biased and things like that, because we've decided this is where the line is drawn. So he outlines that. And, in many respects, that's both, that could be great. There could be plenty to do in that stuff. It also has a semblance, depending on who you are, of bleakness. You don't know if you're providing those things that will do that. The good news is, at least point number one, historically has worked out. We automated vast amounts of the economy from agriculture to in manufacturing, etc. And unemployment, last time I looked, is pretty low. So, that general equilibrium thing has worked out before. Now, this time it might be different, is of course the discussion that gets had. Okay. So what is the lump of AI fallacy? So the lump of labor fallacy, just to remind you, is that there's a fixed pool of jobs that AI could take away, but that's mitigated because you get more productivity, which creates more demand and therefore more demand for jobs as well. So that's the general equilibrium feedback. The lump of AI is when AI is used, it only benefits its owners so that workers need to find new tasks. That's the fallacy going on, that it's only the people who happen to own the AI get the benefits from it. But that's not the case. Just like the lump of labor fallacy, AI still benefits labor through increased productivity and increased demand for labor. And this is not a new idea. This is an old idea. Herbert Simon, back 60 years ago, was thinking about automation. He was thinking about AI as well, actually. So it was just a very primitive then, because we had only just got computers. So he, in this book, The Shape of Automation, actually imagined, and this is going to be a bit more for the economists in the audience, a single commodity economy where a product can be used for production alongside labor. And basically, in a competitive market, price equals cost. That means that the amount you're earning in revenue is going to be divided up between what you pay your workers and what you pay to rent capital equipment going on. And and the proportions of that will depend on technological factors A and B. Here. Uh, the income you produce is equal to the total amount is distributed amongst workers and also paid to the owners of capital. And he imagines what happens if we change these weights to something different. And what happens is initially there's some profits to be had. And the question is what happens to the profits? Who gets it? The capital owners or the wage owners? So one possibility is we don't need as many workers. So A prime is less than A, while B remains the same. But that's going to lead to an increase in the wage. Why? Because the payoff to the capital owners is fixed by the rate of interest, which is itself fixed by the amount people are willing to save, and nothing's changed of that. And so the wages will end up being increased as a result of that uh, 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 reduction in the amount of labor that's needed. The alternative is we need less capital. But even then, we're also going to get the same outcome that wages get beaten up because, again, the return on capital is determined by savings rates, which is something that is not impacted by this thing or not expected to be. And so Simon wrote, so long as the rate of interest remains constant, as depends on the savings preferences, an advance in technology, regardless if it's for labor or against labor, uh, can only produce a rising level of real wages. The only route through which technological advance could lower real wages would be by increasing the capital coefficient, okay, uh, and creating a scarcity of capital and pushing interest rates sharply upwards. So it only changes if AI increases the cost of capital relative to the good. Now, if you delve into the discussions regarding automation and other things like that and why we're automating, that's not expected to occur. Moreover, we do not see at the moment these sort of dramatic increase in interest rates that might be an indication of this thing. So, but that was, that was 60 years ago, but that same economics drives things today. And basically is saying, don't think of these as lump of labor or lump of AI. You have to think about the fact that they're productive. And if they're productive, that is going to flow to various things depending on the usual stuff that's driven that. Okay. So the problem with all of this, of course, is that this presumes this sort of automated AI that like we're literally getting a robot who can do stuff without human intervention. But actual AI is nothing like that. All of the recent advances in the past decade and a half don't look like that at all. Instead, as we pointed out in our book Prediction Machines, where AI, the advances in AI is an advance in one thing. It's an advance in prediction. It's actually an advance in computational statistics. It is now possible to predict a lot of things more accurately and cheaply than ever before, and in some cases, vastly so. But that's it. So if you think about where a prediction is used, it's used in helping people make decisions. What are decisions? They're a choice of an action. They're chosen under conditions sometimes of uncertainty, and so the prediction helps alleviate the uncertainty. But they require other things. They require you to not only think about the uncertainty, but think about why you're taking the actions. And that's something that we call judgment. So all AI does is this. If you automated, you'd be able to tie the prediction to the action so that the AI did the action, and that would automate a task. But you're neglecting this factor, is that the human has to have a role somewhere because just knowing what's going to happen in terms of a good prediction isn't enough to tell you what to do. So we know this when you think about driving. When you're driving, the uncertain thing about it is what is in front of you. Is it the road? Is it a bend in the road? Is it another car about to get in your way? Okay. We know what things to do in that instance. We know that if there is a car in our way, we should stop. If there's a bend in the road, we should turn. Otherwise, we should keep straight. Okay, we know all those things. How do we know all those things? We know all those things because they just make sense. They're judgment, things we've learned. No AI has worked that out, although they could work it out with the right reward function given to them. Who's giving it to them? Humans, telling them, for instance, it's better not to crash a car than to keep to keep going. That actually is a thing. No machine is born with an instinct to preserve the car. That has to be given to it. Um, and so that's critical, and that's the simplest example of this. And even in those examples we have with self-driving cars, if you've ever sat at the wheel of one, you know that sometimes it makes a judgment call that is programmed into it by some other engineer that is different from what you would do. Invariably, people want to take more risks than the AI. That's invariably the case. But the point is, there's a difference. And so notice in this conception of things is we literally cannot take humans fully out of the equation. For most situations, it's the humans actually looking at the prediction and using their judgment to work out what to do. When you choosing what to wear in the morning, one of the things you might look at is your weather app. What's that giving you? It's giving you an outcome of the weather. You're then taking that information and deciding what to wear. Now, what's funny about that, you may think that you can take that prediction. It's obvious what to wear. If it's cold, put on a coat. If it's raining, put on, shoes, appropriate shoes, etc., etc. I mean, how hard is that? But we've never had a weather app that tells you what to wear. Not a popular one anyway. Why? Because there's a lot of personal stuff to that. There's a lot of contextual stuff. It not only depends on the weather, it depends on what you're doing in the day. There would be a lot to have an AI actually lay out your clothes for you. That would be a lot. And that hasn't been done and hasn't been integrated into a weather app. Why? Because there's just a big judgment component. There's a thing going on there. So that task is so far from automation as a result. Um, but this is not just AI as I'm thinking about it as prediction. It applies to the recent stuff as well. What about generative AI? So this is human supplied, but it's human supplied for everything. Generative AI requires judgment in the same way. Let me give you an example. So one of the tasks that you might do is you might have to write a letter for some purpose. Now, if you've used ChatGPT, you know for a lot of those situations, you can get ChatGPT to write the letter. Boom. Looks like you're out of the letter writing job. Not quite. Not quite. Because whenever a technology comes in, we start to realize that what we called writing a letter was more than writing a letter. We internalized it because we were working within ourselves. But now you've got a machine who can do some part of it. You can now think about what writing a letter really was. For instance, to get ChatGPT to write a letter, you have to tell it what to write. You have to tell it who's the letter for, what's the purpose, etc. It can't just dream that up. So you have to give it a prompt. Where's that prompt coming from? It's coming from the person. Okay. Then you could, with that prompt, ChatGPT could write the letter. The thing you thought was the expensive task for you, the thing that took the most time, for most people was the most unpleasant. But it will do that. But it's not done yet because the next thing you have to do is you, the person, have to decide to send the letter. Now, you could just send whatever it writes without looking at it, but for most situations, you want to check. But even if you have decided to look at it, send it without looking at it, you are responsible for that communication because that's communication coming from you. No one's going to reply to ChatGPT and said, "What do you mean I have to teach another course?" Like that's not the that's not, they know where it's coming from. Okay. Interestingly, these three steps were already in the human step. You did all of them. You just didn't have dividing lines between them because you weren't working with a machine. So this is nothing new, but that once we have ChatGPT, nominally doing this task, we realize that actually that task was more complicated and more subtle and involved more processes than we might have thought, given our understanding and thoughts about the costs of doing that task. And so, that happened. And there are things that come from that we're learning to use it with, because you have to learn to use it with correctly, and this is part of communication, so there's an entire social context to it. This university, Vanderbilt University, found out the hard way when they used ChatGPT a few years ago to draft a condolence letter to Michigan State University, who had a shooting tragedy. The problem is the note was signed by associate and assistant deans of the college, including an attribution attached at the bottom that read, paraphrase from OpenAI's ChatGPT AI language model, personal communication from as you might cite anything, as if a ChatGPT was like a person you talk to. Now, what they were trying to do is they thought be honest that they'd helped ChatGPT to write the letter, but everybody said, "How dare you?" The condolence letters are one of these human-centric tasks that it's either morally or inappropriate to have a machine do. Okay. I don't know about you, by the way. That's we have as our feeling. Condolence letters are very hard to write, and actually ChatGPT can do a much better job. But the issue is these guys signed it as that. If they hadn't, they just proofread the letter and sent it out and made sure it didn't quite look like it was coming from AI. Everything would have been fine here. Everything would have been fine. So that was the problem going on here, the human interaction with the AI in the social context. By the way, if you ever get into this pickle, you can use ChatGPT to write an apology letter for having sent something written by ChatGPT as well. Just don't sign it by ChatGPT, otherwise you're compounding it. Okay. And this is, these views of how people interact with AI is coming into a lot of people's thinking. Sendhil Mullainathan, who's gave a distinguished lecture that must be out sometime very soon at the American Economic Association meeting, and I encourage everybody to read it because well, I was there and it was fantastic. But he's basically sort of thinking about uh, how should we be approaching these innovations that are occurring, happening? See what the world will look like with them. The people are spending all this time worrying about the future. And he says, what we're really doing, we're seeing a huge amount of innovation. And there's just stuff to do. And if you're in that period, you should stop looking into the future trying to guess and get out there and just start doing stuff. In other words, we can spend a lot of we can put our energy into worrying, extrapolating what the current latest technology is going to mean for the future stuff. Or we can say this technology has opportunities now to do something, and we should be working on that now. So it was very much a call for us to be much more in the moment on these things, and it resonated with me at least. But I want to step back because why this is important, because we have considered AI as this substitute, this automation substitute. And as I've said before, there's nothing in current AI that lets it work without people. In fact, if you look for automation into the past, it's very few things that we've automated fully that doesn't have a human somewhere, although it may be vastly fewer humans than was previously. But I think the right analogy, right at the moment, is that AI is a tool and a cognitive tool. And we've been here before. Steve Jobs, at the age of 21, said this: when we invented the personal computer, we created a new kind of bicycle, a new man-made partnership, a new generation of entrepreneurs. What was he talking about? There was this article he was inspired by, written in 1973 when he was a teenager, in Scientific American. And what it did is it plotted the cost of transportation against the body weight of various animals going on here, and also machines. And you can see that plot here. And so it's got people. It's got man next to sheep. Cows and horses are faster. Horses are heavier and also faster on a logarithmic scale. Cars are heavier than horses, and sometimes faster, sometimes not, and stuff like a little bit faster than what's going on. But right down the bottom there is a person on a bicycle who is extremely low cost of transport per unit of body weight. So it's not a car, more efficient on a dimension than a car, slower, but far cheaper because it takes the physical energy of the person and amplifies it. And so what Steve Jobs was noticing about computers is they weren't a threat to what people did. But in fact, they were a tool that allowed you to physically amplify not physical tasks, but cognitive tasks. And so his notion was that the computer was a bicycle for the mind. Our whole company, our whole philosophical base is founded on one principle, and that one principle is that there's something very special and very historically different that takes place when you have one computer and one person. And I would amend that for AI is that there's something very special, but no longer historically different when you have one AI and one person. But it's the same thing. It's the same trajectory. What AI is a bicycle for the mind. It is a tool. And right now, the potential to use that tool to do good things is massive, is massive. And is going to attract people because it's much easier to do those things using AI as a tool than it is to take an entire task and try and automate it. I already mentioned how difficult that is for something as simple as choosing what to wear, right? But imagine all the processes of which this is the case. And so when we invented they put out an ad in the Wall Street Journal in 1980 to explain this philosophy because at that time, people were nervous about computers and what they would mean for work. And they were nervous that it was going to completely transform work. Guess what? It did. It did. But did it throw masses of people out of work? No, doesn't look like it did that at all. But it did transform work. And even in the case of computers, that took a while to the transformation to occur. And in the case of bicycles, it took a while too. It maybe took the better part of a century before we got bikes that looked like bikes that people could use in any sort of mass way with pedals and balancing and physical that's going to fit a lot of people to be able to ride a bike. Look, the evolution it was extraordinarily slow when you think about it. For something that did not require any special mechanical insights or scientific progress, although there's some material science going in there, etc. It just took a while to work out how to do this important thing. Similarly, the tools we have, like ChatGPT and so forth, we should think of sitting there in 1830 bicycle-wise. We still haven't worked out how to structure those tools, let alone work with them in some sort of efficient manner. And that's where you should sort of center your views on these things, in my opinion. So where does this lead to? So one of the things that, and this is a quote from Ethan Mollick, who you should have come and speak in this session, who's been thinking a lot about the last few years, more than anyone. He says, everybody wants to teach AI skills, but nobody knows what AI skills are. And it's absolutely true. No one knows. We can teach a bit about how LLMs work and give some advice on prompting. Beyond that, what are people supposed to learn to make them AI ready? There's no clear vision. As of now, my suspicion is that AI skills are basically the skills of managers. Delegation, clear explanations, division of labor, project management, clear feedback. I put this here because I work with AI, with these LLMs, 5, 6 hours a day. I was doing it just before coming in here. I already had a couple of hours and stuff. And I think that the current way to think of them is they're a co-worker, and they're a co-worker that is junior to you. So you need to kind of explain things to, and you need to be clear, and other things you have to do with that. And I think there's something to that, and it's kind of interesting. For in terms of, and it's interesting for me as an economist to say that because these sort of skills of working with people, we call them soft skills, are not something economists are naturally drawn to. It may be important, but we're not naturally drawn to. So to say that maybe these are the skills that we need to be thinking about to work effectively with AI at the moment is quite a strong proposition coming from me. But having sat and done that, I think there's something to it. Um, and we see some of these evidences coming up in some of the discussions. For instance, AI was supposed to wipe out radiologists, but it turned out that AI is working with doctors gives you the best thing because there's context and other things coming to do that. So it's not just a simple way that we can get AIs to replace radiologists, even though almost a decade ago, Jeff Hinton, the pioneer of that, said in front of here at the Rodman School in front of me, we should stop training radiologists right now. The evidence is that, in fact, AI is a bicycle for mind for radiologists as much as anybody. Um, and so generative AI poses this sort of difficult challenge. It's a bit more of a black box than other procedures. When we're doing AI with a statistical framework, we kind of know what we're doing and what we're probabilities. But the issue of generative AI, it serves you up an answer regardless. It never says, I'm kind of uncertain, I don't know. And even if it did, it would be kind of hard to work with in that regard as well. So we've built them up to sort of give you what it regards as the best answer, even though the best answer might be with a good chunk of probability incorrect, especially in more complicated environments. So that can be really useful when you're sort of asking it to explain to you simply something like quantum entanglement or whatever. It can do that. Obviously, if it's asking you to explain it to you and you don't know that concept, what are you supposed to do with this? You have to trust it. And so there's some issues about whether we trust it or not. And sometimes it does some crazy stuff because of the way it's trained on human stuff. So you used to be able to, if you asked an AI, ChatGPT is 9.9 or 9.11 bigger, it would tell you 9.11 was bigger. Now, why would it tell you that? It's not as a number, but it's not training off the numbers. It's training off people who write sections in papers or computer code or whatever, where 9.11 is the more advanced computer program than 9.9, and so it's ambiguous. Oh, how many R's there are in strawberry? It said there's 2 R's in strawberry. There are actually three. The reason it says there's 2 R's in strawberry is a lot of people sort of in sort of popular culture, couldn't kept on thinking it was only 2 R's. And so that sort of got stuck in the AI. So how many R's in strawberry we have to get them? Don't look at what's in the literature. Look at strawberry and count. Do something different. So it's like a whole thing. So those are the ones we can tell. What about the ones we can't tell? We're not good at finding them. That's a whole issue. Now, if you ask an engineer, they'll say, well, that's okay. Look how much more accurate they were than previously. When we used to do these things, they used to be 30% accurate. They were useless. Now they're getting more and more accurate. They get to 95% accurate. Shouldn't that be enough? And in a bit of research that I'm doing with Kevin Bryan, we say no. 95% accuracy is not all you need. In fact, I'm not going to go through this model, but let me just say what happens. What happens basically is there's another function for people. We already talked about judgment, working out whether the payoffs in this problem and how you'd use it, and whether it's your social context in writing a letter and all that sort of stuff. The other part is, sometimes you got to go and check the work. And so there is a lot of most situations where you should not just take the AI output, you should try and do some verification and testing on it, which of course requires another skill. But there are very, very few cases where you won't want to try and do that at the very least. And so you do need humans to bookend the outcomes of generative AI. Just increasing its accuracy is good. No one's denying that. But the accuracy could be very high and you'll still want someone to check stuff. And we have that in a lot of other situations, not just this as well. So there is this is the natural way in which AI and humans are again coming together. It's as a tool. We check what other tools are doing. We should check this too. And there's a value to it. And so there's a sort of artisanal role. Sometimes people say, oh, well, AI won't come in and do the artisanal work. I say instead, AI is a tool. You'll use it as an artisan. So there will be artisanal work. It'll just be with AI. So again, this is another term that gets used to justify something in this, which is loosely. So for instance, in the old, we've seen this before in the old world, when you needed executives wrote a letter, they'd have an assistant who would take dictation and then go up and type. And then when we got a tool, the word processor, it fundamentally changed how that task was done. And in the new world, you did your own writing of the letter and edit and so on. And why did you do that? Nobody is better than the typists in the old age. Nobody is better at dictation and recording stuff that those skills were in the old time. However, we decided we didn't want that anymore. It was the less important thing relative to the ability to take a document and tweak it. What are you doing in tweaking a document like that? You're acting as an artisan. You're slowly crafting the document to have a higher quality, as opposed to sending out instructions, getting something back, sending out instructions, getting something back, which turns out to be far less productive than an artisanal approach. So here was a case in which a computer technology, a bicycle for the mind, allowed for artisanal approaches to flourish. And I think we could see the same sort of thing occur with AI. So AI will need to be managed. The best way to think about an AI now, in my view, is not as a replacement, but is as a co-worker and a junior co-worker with different capabilities and skills that you have to learn how they are at. And it would also be good if the AI could learn more about you as well, but we're far from that yet. None of the stuff do any of that. And so the automation mindset is just simply not going to bring out the best of generative AI. It's going to be just as it didn't with computers, it won't with this as well. There's good reason to think that. Okay, so just to I don't know how my time is going. I think I'm already at some stuff. Uh, this
No, you're
debate has
you're
raised.
you're still
Sorry,
doing fine. It's okay.
fine.
You have
Okay,
another 5 minutes if you want.
okay. Just to give you yet another thing about the issues regarding automation. Eric Brynjolfsson wrote an influential article a few years ago called The Turing Trap, basically saying that too many people are thinking about automation and think about human stuff. We did a response to that last year called The Turing Transformation, in which we argued that, in fact, uh, so the idea of the Turing trap was based on the Turing test, is that people are trying to create AIs that can do stuff that humans do and imitate them. Hence the term the imitation game. And Brynjolfsson argued that that was a bad thing and they should not try to imitate humans. On the other hand, we argued that in a lot of cases, it's a great thing. That what we're trying to do is to allow people to use AI to mimic the skills, have them be able to mimic the skills of a more skilled person. And we've seen that before. I mean, and there's discussion of this elsewhere. I'm not going to, this is the school that for 2 to 4 years in London in order to get a taxi license because you had to learn the knowledge, which was the where locations of everything in London and also how to get between any two locations. It's a huge amount of learning that is required. Okay. Now we have this. A tool, an automated solution. That so previously to drive a cab in London selectively, you had to learn all this information to be of this high quality. Now anybody can drive, whether you know London or not, when they've got a smartphone with this on it. What does that mean? We got a vastly increased number of people who are able to do driving in London and any activities that come from that. And moreover, every time we look at some of these AI deployments, we see that the AI is doing something and it's automating something. In this case, in Tokyo, telling you where ahead of time where to go, where there might be surges in demand, which if you're driving a cab is what you want to do. You want to be in the right place at the right time. And they showed that it increased people's productivity, as mentioned by how much idle time they had. But all of the productivity gains were on the less experienced drivers, virtually none on the more experienced drivers. So in other words, it was raising productivity, absolutely. But it was raising productivity by democratizing, by allowing low-skilled people to imitate the quality of high-skilled people. Now, that's not great if you are earning money off those high skills, to be sure, but it's very good for everybody else. So, take your pick. And this also happened with customer support agents as well. In this recent paper by Eric Brynjolfsson as a co-author himself, who was skeptical about these things. It happens there. So this is happening time and time again. And so obviously not surprising this school is closed now. That was this picture came from. And so we really have to think about this in the regulation sense. We have to really think about whether we should restrict competition from AI. The arguments for because we have a bias towards capital and tax treatment, or we have private markets not supplying enough human capital investment, or we have a missing insurance market for people thrown out of work because of technologies, or because there's been underinvestment in human innovation of the right kind that helps human work with AIs. Those are the things that sort of cause you to say, we should limit AI because it's competing with jobs. And also because current generations don't understand that they're reaping the benefits of stuff and their children won't have anything to do. But the alternative argument is that actually competition is good. The usual economics arguments and leads to better allocation of resources and productivity. And it's more likely than not that we're going to have AI as a complement to existing human resources rather than ignore them completely, for the reason that humans are here and they're doing stuff and they've got skills, and not all those skills can be done by AI. And finally, history tells us something. Past automation has been fined. Why? Because people had time to find other stuff because automation was slow, which brings us to the nub of the argument. The concerns about AI are not concerns about automation. They are concerns about how quickly that will occur and whether people have time to adjust. So it comes down to speed. Will AI diffusion be faster than we can adjust? Specifically, will people slow it down? And they will slow it down naturally. Just think about how AI might or might not be adopted in universities to give you an indication of that. This has happened in the past. This guy looks like an undertaker from Kansas. His name is Almond Stroger. He was an undertaker from Kansas, but he also invented this. This is the automatic telephone switch. Why did this guy invent this thing? Why did an undertaker invent the automated telephone switch? Previously, well, at the beginning of telephones, phones were connected by people. Okay. And so in the late 1800s, this guy invented a switch that could do this job. Why? He hated the people doing that job. He wanted a girlless, cussless, out of orderless, and weightless thing. Evil mastermind. This is a person who automated because he wanted to kill a job. So it wasn't like some separate thing just trying to make money, trying to make life better. was very clear on it. The reason why, to tie him back to the undertaker, he was an undertaker in a small town in Kansas. There he was competing against another undertaker. And so calls would come in and they get routed to the undertaker if someone passed away, and that's how they got their business. You know, I didn't like the people with the switchboard because it was the wife of the other undertaker. So he wanted. Now that's a very strong reaction to this. So what happened here? Okay, this was in the late 1800s. This was done. The technology was solved. He had to invent this. The telephone, I know that's ancient history already for people, but you know, it's a thing. In order to do it, there's a lot that was required, and he did all that. But as a recent study in the QJE has shown, it took 90 years from 1892, when there was the first automated telephone exchange in the Stroger's hometown, okay, to wiping out the last of these. 90 years. 80 to 90 years before it was done. Okay. And in that process, in that time period, the job of switchboard operator was the largest employer of uh, high school graduates in the US. After he invented the automated switch, they had the automated switch and they didn't use it. AT&T. And it took them a better part of a century before they, well, switched over. Okay. So the point is, there's good reasons not to panic. Things take a while. You can read the QJE paper to find out some of the reasons why this occurred, but there's plain old inertia. It takes a while. Opportunity cost, comparative advantage, all sorts of things. But it did eventually succeed in wiping out the largest employment category. Stroger did get his wish. It just took an unbelievable amount of time. Um, so these are my books. I also have a new book coming out later this year on the microeconomics of artificial intelligence. It's a research book. And I have a startup, All Day TA, that provides an AI TA for your courses. It's already in 80 schools around the world. It's not replacing TA, it's replacing the emails you receive from students and augmenting them considerably. So take a look at that. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Gans. A round of applause, even though digital, it's some form of automation or digitalization at least. So thanks again. It was an encompassing talk addressing AI from multiple perspectives. I have a very easy task to try to summarize or at least provide highlights for your talk, if you don't mind me doing this. In general, you started off the point, and then we move to the question from the audience. So please stay with us. The audience, I see that you are there. You posted some questions. We will get to it just in a minute. And Professor Gans started in general from the fear of automation and fear of AI automation in particular. That obviously a shared sentiment among probably some researchers as well, because the narratives that are there are competing, that companies, they do try to propel the idea that, yeah, we want AI, we do not want it, it's a co-pilot, it's a co-worker, and so on and so forth. But there is a overall attempt to automate something, and that people question how it will play out for them. From the business perspective, that is obviously cost-cutting strategy that cannot be ruled out, and somebody can be caught in between, let's say. And it's true, as you've been drawing parallels between bicycle of the mind with computer, that AI is a cognitive bicycle for the mind, if anything. That does have a potential in this autonomy of the task that you presented from your prediction machines book exactly. In this autonomy of the task, indeed attacks or tries to play a role in prediction, which it does, obviously. It's a prediction at scale, and taking action, which here I would add a bit of my own point, that there is a big trend of agentic AI that does take action based on the prediction that it makes. So it's kind of expanding a little bit along this chain of actions in the AI. But human is still in the loop. They are for most of all of the in the judgment component and assigning, because AI cannot, at least yet, assign payoffs or the benefits and rewards. What is best to do? The judgment is so multidimensional that anyway humans would have to participate in which action exactly to take based on the judgment that they are making based on their internal payoff and reward system. So at the very least, humans would have to transfer this information to and codify that information in AI that, as of now, does not really happen. And that's indeed a big question. What is technically feasible in terms of AI, where technology, where it can evolve, which technical capabilities it can acquire in order to expand automation further and further. I think in between of this economic viability versus technological feasibility in a very style of rather economics of innovation, which I partially come from as an economist, that in between the question is what's gonna prevail, or it's dynamic race. Something economically is beneficial now, though might create some intermediate negative outcomes for certain skill groups or demographic groups or so on and so forth. Along the lines of Ethan Mollick that you were talking, you mentioned, and thanks for drawing our attention to the name, that AI address the skills of managers that are soft skills. And from our research as well, we're working on a paper on emerging digital technologies, how they impact labor. We also find that actually the biggest exposed group is managers, middle managers that are information flow handlers. And here I would actually kind of spawn a question to you that soft skills in the end, even though they are the ones that now exposed to AI, both according to various research and Ethan, but at the same time, they are inherently tied to rewards and payoffs because soft skills are all about communication, organization, coordination that does involve a lot of judgment. To say, of course, processing of information flows as possible, but soft skills are they do include a big component of reward function. And the two big points that you outlined and made at the end. Or actually, you maybe mentioned maybe briefly, but that's why maybe I want to also spur discussion about this topic is make labor AI ready, because of I did not maybe fully understand your stance on that. What do you think? Do you agree that this should be done or not? And indeed, given that you spoke later about verification of output, that is AI generated, AI produced, or co-produced with AI, this verification requires high skill, or at least enough knowledge to puzzle through or know better than AI did. And in the paper that you mentioned, I think that's the one, AI in radiology, there was a problem that radiologists cannot integrate, cannot update their priors when they know AI prediction. Let me know if that's the one or not. Because when they didn't know what AI predicted, they trusted themselves. When they knew what AI predicted, they trusted AI. And so they couldn't update their priors about the state, actually worsening overall performance in the presence of like a collaboration with AI. So that is clearly that labor needs to be ready how to work together with AI and how to manage this transition then. So you were talking about transition of automation case, but it's also interesting to talk about how to manage the transition when AI and humans will work hand in hand, because clearly it's not a frictionless process. So I hope I didn't make any mistakes in or disservice to your talk. I want again thank you for the conversation if you have some response to my points, elaborations, and then we open the floor for the audience.
Okay, I think thank you. No, it was a great summary. The and some of these comments that you have seem to be reflected in the chat as well. Um, let's start with the idea for um, getting labor ready for AI. Here's the problem. We don't yet know how to even define what that is. Let's go the other way. What was I? You've got a everybody's had a grandparent or a parent who's somewhat elderly hasn't used a smartphone before, and you sort of think we're going to need to get grandma ready for a smartphone. Now, how would you have even taken that statement when you think about it? It's not what occurs. What occurs is we get a smartphone, we learn how to use it, and then we take it to other people and say, here's what I've learned in terms of how to use it, and here's how you might get started on it too. In other words, the same way we deal with anything. The issue with AI at the moment is, it can do a lot of stuff. In many respects, too many. We aren't even, not everybody even has the time to say every time they get onto a task, can this task now be done better with AI? We don't even have time in the day to think about that because that's going to require some experimentation. And invariably, um, it's not going to be the first time you try it, it's going to just work. With AI, you're going to have to learn it. And so getting people AI ready is almost a premature statement because we do not know what the set of skills are. We don't know what to tell people. If you got $1 billion of funding tomorrow, you wouldn't know what to tell people about AI to achieve that outcome. Because we're still learning. And the rapid pace of change has made that more difficult. You might learn to do something in a current model of AI, and then in 3 months' time, how you'd approach that would be very different. So, this at the moment is a mess, but also I think it's an opportunity to calibrate expectations. I think my personal view, the advice I give to people is experiment. Find your most annoying task and see if AI can alleviate it. And work at it and build up that skill because you're learning a new skill, which is how to work with the AI. And that's a skill that virtually no one has. And moreover, we don't even know what the pedagogy is on how to teach it. It's not even clear that understanding the deep mechanics of what's going on in AI helps you in that task. So we're so at sea, which is fine, But that's why, again, I think this is part of Sendel's claim. Stop worrying. Once you're worrying about are people AI ready, you're worrying about the future. We are still in the moment where we should be experimenting with the present.
Okay. I do have counterpoints, but I do not want to hog the entire attention and time. So thank you. And we can, in case I can write to you an email, we can continue the discussion. So those who ask questions in the chat, you please can unmute, and we will start with Zef Weisman. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question in voice, please do so. If you can't, let me know. I can read it out loud for everybody.
Also, we can't tell if Dev has fallen asleep.
No, people are there. So Zef is there, and okay. So there are connectivity issues, but the person wrote to me. So it
Can't.
seems It seems that AI is currently not strictly regulated. When do you think regulation will emerge, and do you believe it could radically change our perception of AI and its role in the economy? Could it even completely slow down any progress we are seeing now?
Well, absolutely it could. It's already emerged. The European Union already has an AI Act that is in various stages of implementation. Although I read last few days that it might be changed in that. But just to give you an example of how that occurs, my company, All Day TA, Europe is European universities have been big adopters of it. It's multiple languages. It's very good. There's not many human t TAs around, and stuff like that. So Europe's been a big adopter of it. The current AI Act pro doesn't prohibit. It puts all sorts of requirements. It's hard to know what those requirements are on high risk activities. Things like, medical stuff fall into that category, but what is also classified as high risk is education. So next year, educational use AI will be classified as high risk. That means you have to do a whole lot of things to comply with it, of which I don't know quite what those things are, but I do know that they're very costly for a startup to do, if not impossible. Now, this wouldn't be an issue because if you fail to comply, what's the penalty? The penalty is 20% of revenue, but not of European revenue, of worldwide revenue. So if that goes into force next year, we'll have to make a decision. But I'd be happy to risk 20% of European revenue on Europe, but I'm not willing to risk the entire company on that thing. So, we may just turn that off. We may stop supplying Europe. And, um, there's, many thousands of students who are using that, who would be missing out. So I think absolutely we can slow down AI use with regulation. I think I'm concerned that there's just way too much of that. There are all sorts of speculated harms that AI could produce. No doubt about it. They're all over the place. A lot of those harms are harms that we already stop people doing in products, but it's sort of been special with AI. But the issue for me is I would like to see the evidence that those harms are real and possibilities, rather than regulate on speculation of them. Because there's enough uncertainty and other things going on as it is to speculate. So if you presume the worst case scenario and reduce AI, that is very costly because you're missing out on this productivity that we also are measuring and knowing does actually exist at the moment. Now, people will sort of talk about, well, if there's a 1% chance or a 0.01% chance of it destroying the entire world, we should stop it. That's even if it's speculation, and that's a different sort of argument. But I fear that that's not what's going on here.
Okay, thank you. I hope, Zev, you heard the answer and it was to the point you asked. So next one, Giacomo Damioli, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thanks. My question is short and goes a bit beyond the labor aspect. So even if I buy your narrative about labor aspects, I'm curious to know if you have any worries about, let's say, competition, market power, and on the different aspects, if you can very quickly give an overview of your opinion about the potential environmental consequences of AI.
Right. So on the market concentration front, what we have currently, and I'm like an antitrust economist, you know, from time to time, and I'm always concerned about competition. But in this case, man, do we have a lot of competition. I know they're provided by, seemingly large firms, but there are a number of them. It's, from that perspective, it's currently great. Uh, you know, Companies have numerous options to choose from, and the price of the using AI has been going down and all that sort of stuff. Will we have some concentration in the future? Yes. Will it come from any of the current players? I doubt it. Competition comes from not from the people who provide the technology, but from the people who solve its biggest problem. 30 years ago, we thought the internet was all going to be dominated by the providers of the internet, the cable companies, the telecommunications companies, and we spent an enormous amount of energies trying to regulate them. And of course, only to find that, in fact, the companies that dominated the internet were like Google. And why did Google dominate the internet? It solved its biggest problem, which was information overload. I don't know what AI's biggest problem is yet. But whoever solves it is going to be a monopolist in the future. But regulating these current providers or doing something about it now is just not going to cut it. In terms of environmental consequences, that's hard to tell. Basically, it's a massive increase in the demand for energy, electricity in particular. Obviously, at a time when we're trying to, when our energy generation is broadly polluting, doing more of that is bad. But there are already sort of regulations in place. The new forms of energy that are actually cleaner, both nuclear and solar and wind and other things like that. There are also ones that are ones where it's hard to locate them where we used to locate new generating plants. But the good news was with AI, we don't care where they're located. They can be located in the best place in the world. So the marginal electricity plants that are being used to power the generators may well be less polluting or not polluting at all. So I'm optimistic that AI won't be the source of our environmental destruction and may actually help a little bit, but I understand the concern. I mean, it's no guarantee.
Thank you. Like AI is a solution in the search of a problem, a little bit to to what you say. Then next question from Thomas. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the question. So we just, given that I'm in keeping time, we are still in very much time. But if you can summarize your questions a little bit to like most interesting things that you want to ask for you. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for a great talk, and that sparks a lot of optimism when I will be thinking about this topic in the future. So my question actually goes a little bit into the interaction between AI and learning, because what we currently see is that the experts has a huge leverage on their skills, while those junior positions are vanishing. And my question goes a little bit back to whether the AI wouldn't spur a lot of polarization rather than democratizing the skills that current workers have, and what are your insights on further implications of this? Thanks.
Right. No, I mean, this is obviously a big issue, and it's one we don't know a lot about, as per usual. Historically, when you've got new technologies coming in, younger people tend to be better at adjusting and using them than older people. And I think that is very safe to say, even if older people have the expertise, etc. So I think I think there is a natural flow of those things that sort of biases one way. There's obviously this issue. Let's take it with coding, is that my suspicion is that so AI can do a lot of coding. My suspicion is an AI tool in the hands of an experienced coder is much more powerful than one in the hands of an inexperienced one, although it can dramatically increase the productivity of the inexperienced one. So where it misses is in that ability to know if the code is good, useful, interacts with other things well, etc. So I sort of alluded to this in the 95% is not all you need, is this sort of verification and oversight that is required. So an experienced person sort of already has those skills. So you have this interesting tension. You have people without those skills can be given this tool that can dramatically improve their productivity, but in a way that could actually be harmful beyond a very short term in terms of, turn out to be wasteful. And the people who have the skills to be able to wield that and to learn it properly are less prone to do so. This is not new. This is one of the reasons why this stuff takes time. This stuff takes time. We will have fits and starts, disasters, mistakes, etc. in adopting this technology. I can't think it going any other way. We had that with the computers, we've had that with the phones, we've had that with all sorts of things. So, this is where that term disruption comes in its sort of negative context. It'll be disruptive. It'll be disruptive, but it also comes in the positive context. How else will you do it?
So
Thank
you
you.
can't, in the very thermodynamics way, you cannot gain anything without letting go of something.
Yeah.
So that's just to provide some bit of summaries. So thank you, Thomas, for your question. Then next one is Jack Stilgo. Please unmute yourself if you'd like and ask your question.
Thanks, Katerina. Thank you for a really interesting talk, Professor Gans. I'm going to ask the shorter one of my questions, which is just about, so most of your talk was about outputs, outcomes, implications. I'm really interested in the sort of upstream questions about the constitution of these systems. And in particular, the labor points, given that this is a talk about labor, a lot of the concern that has taken AI policymakers and innovators by surprise is a concern about copyright recently, right? The accusation that these things are built on stolen, you could conceptualize it as stolen property or stolen labor. Where are you on that? Do you, as a sort of microeconomist, have insights on that, or is that not your concern?
I know it's my concern. In fact, I have a paper forthcoming in the Journal of Law and Economics precisely on this issue. I think it's an important concern, and it's one of those. The reason being is because it's being working its way through the courts at the moment, New York Times authors and stuff like that, where it could easily be the case that that could shut down the current models quite easily. So obviously, it's of concern. I think there are places where copyright is driving these models and driving stuff, the materials, and it's obvious to it. But there are other places, and in particular in those cases, where it's sort of this large language, this ability to sort of use things, but in a very circuitous route. In other words, not reproducing a work and copying it per se in a way that sort of causes people to not have to subscribe to the New York Times. And so why is that important? It's important because we do a lot of that already. When I go and I teach a class, I've read a whole lot of material and then I go and teach the class. Do you know who I don't have to pay to do that? Any of the authors that I've read the material from. I don't have to pay any more than having to have had access to the book or what have you. There are people who summarize stuff. Where Ekaterina summarized my talk here. You could have just come in at that last part of that and not had to sit through my ramblings and just listen to her. And I wouldn't have had a claim against it because summarization like that is just fine. So my concern is that a lot of what AI is doing right now with stuff in the past has been in the order of things that were found previously acceptable, and that nobody was sitting there writing those books saying, I'm expecting to get a cut of the AI in its ability to know language and other things from it. So I kind of think it's different. But there's a huge amount of uncertainty at the moment. There's a huge amount of whether the current law can deal with this situation properly. And so we're sorting that out. My bias is if you are producing a creative work and you've missed out on a commercial opportunity because this AI has just ripped off your work, then you should be rewarded for it. The problem is we're only really going to be able to work out if that's the case after the fact, but that's okay because we can do that. We can promise to give you money if it's turned out it's been harmful. And in some cases that might be directly the case. In other cases, you might not be able to prove that. I mean, I've got books that have been used to train AI. I could never prove that I don't think there's been any harm from it, and let alone being able to even think about how I could make a theoretical case for it. So yes, it's a big issue. I've thought a lot about it. You look at my Substack just recently. I've written a lot on this, so I'll put you there.
Thank you. Perfect. We get even more content to read about the topic, expanding in all the aspects. And I have the last question. Simone, you had a raised hand. Please unmute yourself and go on.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina, and thanks very much, Joshua, for the talk. Really touching upon so many directions. So the question and consideration is one. It impinges a little bit on things that have been said. The first is, it's very nice to think about AI as a bicycle for the mind, though it's a bicycle produced by hyperscalers. So it's a little bit different than that case, hyperscalers or big tech. So the concentration and the upstream.
Well, you're not worried about big bike?
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, so indeed, so whether that is indeed changing the metaphor. But the other question is that it's very interesting that you brought back the artisanal point. So I find it like maybe it goes in contrast with the idea of the Ben John's paper of the end of the Renaissance man or person, let's say, for more gender balance. So do you see a return of the Renaissance person, and does the artisanal somehow despecialization is at odds with the AI agents trend or not, in your opinion?
Well, that's a great question. I am, that could go on different dimensions. I focus on this artisanal part because, I've taken that to the main part of my job, which is the main part of my job is producing papers. And so since the reasoning models came about just 4 or 5 months ago, I've taken it upon myself to try and use the AI models to improve that entire process. So the paper AI as a strategist paper, take a look at that. That was written in a week. Now, what does that say? It could be crap. Let's put that out there, and we'll find out when it comes back from a journal. It could be. Although I did even in that week show it to peers and who should know and sort of pass the test. But the other part of it is, why was it produced in a week? It could not have been produced in a week 5 months ago, because I didn't know what the AI was and wasn't capable of and what I needed to look at. In fact, I did produce a paper 5 months ago on this same experiment. It was a frivolous paper on whether the efficient markets hypothesis is robust to time travel. You can read that paper. I produced it in half an hour and it got published in Economic Letters. Looking back on that paper, 5 months looking back, it is far, far worse than what I would be able to do now. Far worse. It was enough to get published in Economic Letters because the idea was cute and the exposition was clear enough, etc. But there are some things with it that I would have learned how to do better. And so my point upon that is that there is craft to be learned. Some of that craft is stuff that we learn. Some of it, the ability to produce these papers, is coming from things I've learned over the last 30 years. And I can't tell what is what. And until more people start doing it with different skills and experience than I have, we won't be able to tell. But my view at the moment is it's very much a crafting tool, and my interactions with it feel very much like what people describe as working with tools. And so that's all I can talk about at the moment. But I can't imagine going back. This is a tool. I'm like, well, I need to stop using this tool because it's making me. I do not believe that at all. I think it is vastly improving what I do. And also, very importantly, I'm turning next week 57. you look at all your professors around there, most of those people are out to pasture. And I was feeling that as well until this AI came along. And I'm like, I got more to give.
What a wonderful note to end the talk on. Thanks again, Professor Gans. We do not wish you right now the happy birthday, but whoever is willing to, next week, please go ahead. So thanks again, everybody, for very deep and cutting questions, for staying here with us for the entirety of the talk. And thanks again for our speaker today. I would like to again share my screen to and advertise our topic survey for season 4. So there will be a selection of topics to choose among, as well as to specify your own. Please scan or follow the link that I posted in the chat. I hold it for a couple of more seconds. Please don't lose time to scan it. And next links we have, please follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or visit our website to stay updated. And thanks again, everybody.